Skaven in Warhammer 40k? Yes, please. And as long as Games Workshop doesn't do it, I'll just have to do it myself. And I'm not just gonna do one or two guys, I'm gonna do this field ordnance battery. There's a nice gun emplacement for the Astra Militarum, because, you know, in the end, Imperial Guard, Skaven, they have a lot in common. They are very similar. Now, these wheels are not the original wheels for this field ordnance battery, FOB. These come from Tiny Legends, and they just make it look a little bit more arcade. They're meant to be for the deathcore of Krieg, you know? These sort of wheels, those are World War I wheels. They don't have rubber, they don't have, what is it called? Wheels that are inflated. And I think it fits the Skaven a little bit more. They have older tech that is somehow not stored correctly, and the Skaven got their hands on it. Now they're using it. So with the carriage in place, I decided to go for the massive last cannon. For the very simple reason that I've already done the little artillery piece with Skaven. Now, long ago, when I was just doing this for fun and having my own little time alone, make a little bombast field gun. Now, I think a massive last cannon fits the Skaven just as well as a piece of artillery, because it's just weird, overpowered tech. So let's put this on there loosely with a little bit of post body. I want to paint this separately, and then we're going to start working on the actual Skaven crew. Let's first do a gunner, and I'm going to start with the body of a plague monk, which is, you know, very basic body. It has no arms, it has no head, so it's very easy to kitbash with, because all you got to do is just glue the hands onto the shoulders and you're done. So this hand here, this comes from the actual artillery crew of this piece, and then I got a little pointing hand that comes from just the Cadian sprue, and that one will go on to the other shoulder. And then I think I can fit him right here in between the gun carriage, as if he's manning that little screen over there. Hang on, let me put some poster putty on his feet as well, so that he can actually stand in the right place. Now I think something like this, where he is kind of pointing at the screen and his hand is getting ready to be used for those wheels over there. Something like this, I think, is a pretty good position. Just have to stick on his head, and that's the first crewman done. Now the next, something of a loader. Now, I got this little guy here. It is one of the old Clan Rat models, not the new ones yet. I like this one because it's much more compact. The new ones have a much more dynamic pose. And with this guy, I can just stick a little arm on his right shoulder. Very important to note that he has his arm already, his left arm connected to the body. All of these Clan Rats have this. So they're not that great for making normal Cadian troops, for example. For that, you're gonna need these guys, the Stormvermin. But this arm comes from the same artillery kit, and I got this hand over here that is now attached to this sort of crank that is supposed to be there in the center to elevate or, you know, reduce the elevation of the gun. I'm just gonna snip off that whole little piece and glue it to his arm, and he'll go right there in between the gun. And then they have this crate over here with the extra last packs, because this is going to be attached to a gun over there. And then here's a crate, and I'm just going to position the lid in such a way that it looks like he's holding it open and he's looking for a new pack. Maybe to load the gun, maybe to take for himself. These are Skaven after all, and even in 40k, I imagine they're going to be pretty nasty to deal with. Now, this is a gunner, a loader, they're gonna need an overseer. And that rat bastard is coming from the new Stormvermin box. They're pretty cool, they got a lot of armor and enough cloth. I think with the right paint scheme, they can look Cadian. Now, on one hand, he needs something like a las rifle, because if you're an overseer as a Skaven, you need to have some way to defend yourself. You're not going to be an overseer for long if you don't have a way to stand up against the little minions. But then on the other hand, a good overseer always has a whip. So I got this, it's a Drukhari whip. I think it will do well. It's nice and vicious looking. I just have to clean it up a little bit. And then he too is ready to take his position on the base here in the back, ready to inspire his crew to great deeds with his whip. Now, if you want to make something look Skaven, add more Skaven. It's supposed to be a swarm. This is supposed to be a mess. This isn't an organized crew. There's probably some other Skaven walking around looking at that cannon and go, hey, I wouldn't mind being in charge of that cannon. Or looking at the overseer and go, hey, give me that whip. So we need a couple more Skaven on here to make it look like there's more of a swarm all around. First, a little buddy for the overseer, because you don't get to the top of the Skaven pyramid all by yourself. You need to have some friends who are taking the risks while you watch their back, and then when they achieve something, you're in the perfect position to stab them in the back and take whatever they have done. So this guy, he just gets the nice little Thompson gun, with the right Cadian arms, and he is going to stand somewhere over here, I think, just to crowd the base a little bit more. And he has good line of sight of what's happening at the cannon. Now, these four, they're kind of together. Now we got a little bit of open space over here, and I want to show that rat animosity. So maybe something over here coming in to see if they can take over, or maybe we need some more gunnery crew. Let me see what I've got. Different direction. See, I like the idea of strife in a Skaven army, but I already have this on my bombard. I got this guy here defending his cannon and his crew from 2 interlopers. I don't want to do that again. Come on, I already have that done. Let's do something else. So I was thinking, why not make a 40k warplock engine seer? Engineer, I don't know what the Skaven are called, the techie dudes. And I think it fits well with the last cannon too. So I've got here the lower and upper body of a Genestealer Cult's Metamorph. These are the guys with 3 arms, and they look nice and high-techy, sort of mining equipment, but with some extra cloth on it. You know, this is a nice robe. I think it looks good for an engineer. And then, of course, a little AdMech backpack that goes right on the back there. And I got this nice little gun. It's from the Cataphront Destroyers Breachers kit from AdMech as well. And normally it goes on the right hand side, but I have this spot over here where I have space for 2 arms. So it makes sense if I can add a bionic arm like this gun and an actual natural arm. So let me get some of this poster putty and see if I can fit this over here. Even though the bubble is on the wrong side, the armor box is on the wrong side, I think I can still kind of have this fit over here. Just pointing straight forward, and then I have space for an arm over there and an arm over there, because I feel we don't have enough banners in Warhammer 40,000. They're all in Age of Sigmar. So this guy, he's gonna get this nice big banner from the new Stormvermin kit from Age of Sigmar to just hold in one hand over there, and then he needs another hand over there. I have to go and look for a nice bit, a right hand, maybe a melee weapon, maybe some other kind of high-techy thing. Let me go take a look what I have. And I've settled on this thing here. A Cadian officer's arm, because then he has actual markings on his shoulder pad, with a Sikaran Ruststalker blade that is attached to it. So that it looks like he just has a mechanical hand there as well. And I'm just gonna see if I can fit it like this. I think this is getting there. It's falling apart with all the poster putty. Time to start gluing some stuff and time to look for a head for this guy. Yeah, there. Pretty cool if I say so myself. I think he looks nice. He looks mechanicus. He has this weird gun on the side. It worked out okay. It should be on the other side, but I think it's okay. I love the banner because I want more banners. And the only thing that's missing is his tail. So let's make that next. And I'm making that tail with a little bit of green stuff and a green stuff roller from Green Stuff World. Yeah, if you want one of these, you can find it in the description below. It's really nice. You just have 2 of these sort of ribbed pieces and you rub them together, and then whatever bit of green stuff is under there comes out like this. Like there's a pattern on it. So it kind of looks like a Skaven tail. I'm just gonna see if I can stick this on his backside and sort of sculpt it a little bit sharper at the end, pointier at the end. But I think this is gonna be looking good enough. So the crew is now Skaven enough, but this cannon, I mean, this is just an Astra Militarum cannon and it needs to become more Skaven. So first of all, we take a sharp knife and we're just gonna deface this Aquila over here. And I'm just gonna make it look like some Skaven took some sharp object and started carving this here and just sort of start to deface it and try to destroy it. And that way, there we go. It is sort of cut away, defaced, and maybe you put over some graffiti or something after the whole painting is done. But also this is a frontline weapon, more or less. It's supposed to be in line of sight of the enemy, because how else are you going to shoot a massive las cannon at your enemies? But that means the enemies can shoot back, and so I'm going to put some battle damage on this as well. And first, with sharp knife, I'm just going to scrape off some of the edges to just make it look like this is had been hit by some sort of ricochets, hitting it, or maybe it's just scraped against the wall while they were moving it, or maybe it's just rust working its way through the metal and sort of slowly degrading it. And then, hang on, let me remove all the loose parts. There, easier to work with. Now I want to make a little hole in here as well. Why not? Well, let's do a little hole over here and another one right next to it. make it look like something big has been shooting at it. We drill out those holes with a small bit first, just to give it a little pilot hole, and then with the bigger bit we just get to work, start drilling big holes and make it through and through. I kind of want to make it look like there's a proper hole being shot through it. Maybe that's why it was abandoned by the Astra Militarum, and that's why the Skaven could pick it up later on. I'm gonna do a couple more bullet holes. I really want to make this look like it's in heavy combat, and then it looks like this. And I'm quite happy with how it turned out. We got a couple holes here, and I also did some damage in the back, just where there's sort of spacings. There's not a full metal plate. It rusts through, it gets damaged, it breaks. Somebody steps on it, it breaks even more. And it's time to paint. I sprayed him with Dunkelgrau from Vallejo, which is black, but not exactly black, slightly lighter black, a little bit of blue in there. It's just because I prefer that kind of spray can. You can start with black. And I'm going to start with rusting this thing completely through and through. And for that, I got this Corrosion Texture from AK Interactive, because I'm not that happy with how Typhus Corrosion works nowadays, because it doesn't have as much texture as it used to. And I really love a very rough texture for this miniature. I still use Typhus Corrosion and other stuff, but here I'm just going to use this, and it dries up much darker than it goes on. So keep that in mind. It's not going to be this light brown. So this gets Typhus Corrosion, the gun gets Typhus Corrosion, the whole body, everything gets a lot of Typhus Corrosion. There's one issue though, it doesn't cover as well as I expected or would have liked. So I am gonna have to go over all of this again, but then with actual Typhus Corrosion. And this way I think I'll get best of both worlds. I get the rough texture of the AK diorama pot and the color from Typhus Corrosion. Because Typhus Corrosion, as you can see, it's much darker brown and it will actually cover. I think the AK stuff would be nice if I had painted it first in a Militarum green, because then you would have sort of rust growing on top of the Militarum green. The green would show through the layer of rust, and it would give a pretty cool effect, but it wouldn't be the effect I was looking for. I want this to be completely rusted through, so I need this to completely cover absolutely everything. Yeah, now it's completely rusted through and nasty and awful looking, and this is clearly a very old carriage that the rats stole from somewhere. Now I'm gonna dry brush the rust a little bit with some Skrag Brown, a kind of orangey brown, and then I follow that up with some Ryza Rust to really give it that orangey look. And I'm not cleaning my brush first, so I'll be using some Skrag Brown Ryza Rust mix over here, but that just gives it a little bit more interesting colors. And now I keep going with the rust with these 4 enamels. Dark, medium and light crusted rust deposits and rust streaks, all from AK Interactive. And with this I can layer up some more interesting rust on the miniature and make it look less than just sort of this homogeneous, everything is brown and then a highlight of slightly lighter brown and then a highlight of orange, and get it sort of mixing and matching with these colors and get a much more interesting rust. This is fine for something as small as the Skaven themselves. You'll see this in a minute how I'm painting these. It's very similar to this rust, and it doesn't need all these extra colors, but this is a pretty big piece of the miniature, so it needs a little bit of extra work. Now starting with the light crusted rust deposits, because it's easier to work your way towards the darker than starting with the darker and then getting a light on top, because this all dries up lighter than it goes on. Something to keep in mind. I got my little cup of white spirits over here, and I mix it a little bit in the lid of the pot, and we're just going to start adding little bits of rust here and there, where we think the rust might sort of accumulate and grow. So the light crusted rust deposit, it's not dry yet, it is drying, but I'll already start with the medium crusted rust deposit, which is just a little bit less light and a little bit more orangey. And I'm gonna do kind of the same thing, but I'm not gonna try to apply it in the exact same spots as the light stuff. I'm gonna sort of overlay it over there and draw some streaks and get some more patterns going, just to change things up a little bit more. And after light crusted rust deposits and medium crusted rust deposits comes dark crusted rust deposits. And this one, it is really nice and reddish, so it's gonna add a whole lot more than the other two, because the other two were more like orange. And I gotta be very careful with this, because this is gonna stand out like a sore thumb, so I have to be very sparing with this and feather it a lot with plenty of white spirits, so that it doesn't become like a nasty red spot on the whole carriage. Now after this we still have one more to go, and like I said, it shows up way brighter than it goes on there initially. After it dries, it looks like this. It's really orangey, yellowy even, and that's why it's good to start with the lightest and then work your way up to the darkest, sort of camouflage the lightest bits. And it's why I have this fourth rust, which is called rust streaks, and this is more like the typical brown rust color that most rust has. And I can use this to sort of feather the bits that are too light and add a little bit more brown streaks to it. And again, this dries up lighter, less coverage than if it goes on. But this way you can get all the interesting rust textures on there, and you don't have to do multiple passes. You can make this much nicer if you just keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but it's a lot of work, and I've tried to keep my painting simple. So rust streaks everywhere to sort of blend these rust pieces together. Now there's a couple of non-metallic pieces on the gun that I don't want to make looking rusted out, and one of them are these coils on the actual las cannon. And I'm just going to start with a base layer of pure white and some contrast frosthard for the glow, and then some heavily diluted white in the recesses just to make it look like it's glowing a little bit stronger. Good enough. And the cables, I'm gonna paint them nice bright red, and then I'll dry brush these last packs over here. I mean, they gotta be kind of new, right? If they still wanna have power, it has to be something relatively new. And the box as well, I had a little bit of Typhus Corrosion on there, I mean the AK or Corrosion Texture, and I'm gonna just dry brush over this just to make it look like it's a little bit newer than the cannon itself. And while I'm dry brushing silver, I might as well take care of the barrel of the gun, because of course this is gonna shoot the rust right off itself. And so it needs to have a little bit of cleared rust around the very tip of the barrel. And then I dry brush that with a little bit of black, just to give the hint of soot forming here on that barrel. And I want my rats to be recognizable as Cadians, so I'm first gonna do a very basic sort of tan with green armor scheme, and this is starting with Steel Legion drab over all the cloth, and Deathcore drab for his armor plates, but not the chainmail. And everything then gets a dry brush of Rockart flesh. Not too heavy on the armor, but pretty heavy on the cloth. I'm gonna add some rust to the minis by painting the chainmail with Typhus Corrosion. And a little dry brush of Skrag Brown to make it a little bit more orangey. And with this, I'm also gonna hit a little bit of the armor here and there, just to give it a little bit of rust tones as well. And now we gotta make the metallics look a little bit more metallic. And I do that with the smallest dry brush I have and a little bit of Iron Warriors. And I'm just gonna dry brush all over all the metallics, the armor, the guns, the little bits that are hanging off his whip, everything, even the chainmail that I just rusted out, just to give it a little bit of a metallic shine. But then after that, I dry brush the top of the mini, so the head, the helmet, the shoulders, with some silver, and I'll also do the weapon, just to make it shine a little bit more, and it draws the attention even more, because the face, the top part of the body, and the weapons are always the most important in Warhammer, and that's where the attention already goes automatically. And so guiding it there with a little bit more of a highlight is a good idea. It's time for the skin, because I want to do more with the armor and the cloth. It needs to become dirty, nasty and grimy, but they're rats, so the skin is probably dirty, nasty and grimy as well. So I'm gonna do that first, get the skin, the hair, the tail, all of that done first, with a layer of Bugman's Glow. That gets a highlight of Cadian flesh tones, and then some bright white teeth and nails, and I got a couple of pretty decent Cadian looking rats here right in front of me. Now, the basic colors are done, so it's time to start griming and rusting and making them look a little bit nasty. So first off, it's time for some streaking grime. And this I'm just going to put on as a wash over all of the model. Starting with the cloth, but also the armor and even the skin. Like I said, rats, they're probably dirty creatures. They're probably covered in gunk and nastiness, and especially on the battlefield that these guys are on. And then the weapons get a little bit of a rust wash here and there, just in the recesses, just to make them look a little bit worse than they looked before. And I'm also going to do this on the armor plating, just give it a little bit of rust here and there, anywhere where there's two pieces of metal meeting each other, add a little bit of rust and some rust streaks. And it doesn't have to be super detailed, it's a little diorama, it sort of gets lost in the whole diorama if you look at it from a little bit further away. So I'm just going for very basic rust on these guys, while the rust on the cannon is going to be much more intricate. Time for the finishing touches on these four ratlings before I start working on the Mechanicus guy. And it's time for the eyes, and I'm just getting some corn red and giving them little red glowy beady eyes. And it's time for the Tech Priest, the Mechanicum rat. And of course, all his cloth is gonna get red. In this case, it's corn red. All of the armor gets a layer of brass scorpion, and then I dry brush all of that with some Rune Lord brass. And after this, a dry brush of silver, really light, to just finish it off. But I'm also going to dry brush all the weapons with this silver and all the other parts that should just be sort of plain steel. Then a little light dry brush of the cloth with rock-art flesh, and I'm also going to use this rock-art flesh to paint all of the banner. Then any of the hoses, I'll turn them black with some contrast black Templar. The skin tones are done in the same style as the regular crew. I've done a little bit of Steel Legion drab on the wooden pole, and he's ready for me to try some freehanding. And I suck at freehanding, but I wanted to record this so you guys can watch me suffer through all of this. I'm just going to see if I can draw some Skaven icon over here on the banner with some corn red. And I'm using a nasty old dry brush that is not doing so well. And I think, you know, Skaven, they probably not that good at painting themselves. So if I can just do a bit of an icon like that, it might look like it's painted on there, maybe even with blood, who knows. Okay, I had to fix that icon. It was a little messy, but this is better, I think. And now he, just as the others, gets a wash of streaking grime. And it's just going all over, and I'm going to reduce it a little bit so that it settles in the recesses more than on the ridges. And it's time to put it all together. I got the cannon already on the base, the whole crew is here, and I got a little bit of base decorations here as well in the form of some sandbags and an ammo crate with last packs. And I'm going to put it all together, but I first want to put a very thin layer on there with Stirland mud. And this is going to be the basing material. And I need to do this first because I want to make sure that the whole base at least gets some coverage of this. And after I put all the miniatures on there, it's going to be hard to make sure it all gets covered in this mud. So I'm just, you know, as if I'm making a sandwich for myself, putting on a very thin layer of the Stirland mud everywhere. Now the base is still wet, and that's what I want, because I want to push these guys kind of into the base material so that it looks like they're sinking into the mud. And so this is the first crew member. He's the one who's kind of manning that little screen they have over there, and maybe puts a hand around that steering wheel, but he should be right there. And hope that the gun doesn't go off, because if the recoil, I don't know if last cannons have recoil, but if there comes a recoil, he's going to get knocked out. Now the second guy, he's the one who's going to be manning the ammo crate. And so he's going to have to go here, in between there. And then I get the ammo crate that I prepared. And I'm just going to park that right in front of him. And I'm pushing everything pretty hard down into the mud. You might not see it on camera, but I want to make sure that it looks like they are sinking into the mud. And it's like a nasty wet business over here. And I'm going to do a lot more with the base, but you know, this is a good beginning. Now I was fiddling out a bit already with these two guys, the two overseers, and I think this guy with the gun would fit much better over here on that side in a sort of fortified position with those sandbags that I prepared. So I'm just going to do this guy first, and I'm going to see if I can put him somewhere to the side, somewhere over here, so that he is ready to whip the living hell out of them, while still keeping an eye on the last pack that's over there. Now making sure that the cannon can keep firing and making sure that the loader is actually doing his job. Now this guy, like I said, can go over here. And he is kind of protecting the battery from perhaps enemies that are advancing towards them, or maybe other ratlings, Skaven that are coming towards them to see if they can take over the gun. Oh, let me clean up this guy and then I'll put him in place too. And he will go right there. In the back, leading from the back, as a good Skaven does. Still sort of cheering along his men. He has his poker there ready as well, just in case it's needed. And then I'm going to do some of these sandbags. And I'm, like I said, the guy here up front with the gun, he is going to get a little bit of cover from these sandbags that are going to go in here. And I'll add some barbed wire over there too later on. But I first have to make sure all of this dries, and if you use too much super glue on this while the basing is still drying, it's gonna sort of show up as sort of crusted plastic. It's a bit nasty and you need to paint over it, so let's see if that happens, and then we'll come back after that. It all turned out great. I'll add some barbed wire, and this stuff comes from Green Stuff World. It's great. You wrap it around a brush handle, and then you can just glue it on there. And I also have the other barbed wire, which has actual sharp pointy bits, but you really don't want that on a miniature you're playing with. It's great for dioramas, great if you don't have to touch the miniature again, but you really don't want that stuff on the tabletop. It can really hurt yourself, but it also can damage the paint, because if you have miniatures scraping next to each other, you have something really metallic, sharp, pointy, sticking out, you're going to damage your minis. So just a little bit of barbed wire here and there, and this needs some rusting up. So I'm just gonna do a really quick rust recipe for this, which is just Typhus Corrosion and then a little dry brush of Skrag Brown. And then we go back to the base, because right now it's just a nice smooth layer that's on the ground. But I want to make this look like a completely churned up muddy mess. So I'm just gonna add some globs of this Stirland mud here and there. And I'm also gonna make the sandbags and the barbed wire just a little bit more recessed into the mud. And same with the feet of these Skaven. Like this guy over here, he's floating just a little bit too much, and I want to make it look like this guy is dirty. And also just put some mud on the tails, on the cloth, all of that. I'm not dry brushing dust on, I'm going to use this instead to make it look like they're just, you know, slogging it out, going through the mud, getting stuck. And then once this is done, I need to make it look wet. And so I'm going to do that with some puddles from AK Interactive. It's a really nice product I got here, and it dries up glossy and it looks like puddles. Yeah, life is full of surprises. So this I'm just going to add here and there on the base, and I'm going to try to just add it into the recesses. Now if I put up a glob, I'm going to put it in the recess so it looks like an actual puddle, and this just goes pretty much everywhere. And then there's only a few steps left. First is a bit of streaking grime for all these little bits of base decorations that I added, like the ammo crate and the sandbags, to put it in line with the rest of the Skavens, but also the cannon itself. I'm just going to add a little bit of streaking grime here and there, make it streak down, make it look dirtier, nastier, but I'm going to try to not cover up the rust, of course. I want to make sure that the rust is the thing that sticks out most. So reduce it a lot, let it streak a lot, and then it looks like this. I'm really happy with the result. It really looks Skaven, but at the same time Imperial Guard. The cannon completely rusted through. I like it. It shows the age of the cannon, how old it is, and that it's probably abandoned by the Imperial Guard and then picked up by the Skaven later for their own use. Then the whole crew. I used a different body for almost everything, which really adds to the variety and sort of the chaos of a Skaven army. Cadians or Death Corps of Krieg, they're all the same. They all look the same. They all have the same clothes on, the same armor, the same uniform. Skaven aren't like that. But sticking with the Cadian paint scheme really makes this work. You have lots of different paint schemes for Cadians or for Imperial Guard regiments. But it doesn't really work if you're making a Skaven Imperial Guard, I think. It's good to stick with the sort of Cadian paint scheme, the tan with the green. It works and it makes it instantly recognizable as Skaven Guard. Now the Tech Priest, I like him, a little colorful addition to this base, not all just greens and tans and browns. And I think he looks pretty cool, heavily modified, and I got inspiration out of this. Maybe I should make a Skaven kill team. I think that would be pretty epic. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, like this one, share it with your friends. Let them also enjoy these amazing videos. And you'll probably like this video as well.